Good evening, my friend. As I sit here tonight, surrounded by the gentle quiet that only comes when the world has settled into sleep, I feel compelled to share something with you. The soft glow of a single lamp illuminates my space, and I can hear the subtle rhythm of my own heartbeat, steady and calm. There's something sacred about these midnight hours, isn't there? When the noise of the day fades away, and we're left with just ourselves and the divine presence that never sleeps. Tonight, I want to tell you about a prayer that changed everything for me. A prayer that opened doors I never knew existed. As Psalm 4, verse 8 reminds us, "In peace I will lie down and sleep for you alone." Lord, make me dwell in safety. Before we begin this journey together, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Please hit that like button if this message is already speaking to your heart. And don't forget to subscribe for more evening prayers that bring real peace. Now let me share with you what happens when we truly surrender our nights to God's miraculous work. There's a heaviness that settles on our shoulders as each day draws to a close. Isn't there, tonight as I speak to you? I'm reminded of a particular evening when this weight felt almost unbearable. It was 3 months ago when my 7-year-old son had been diagnosed with a rare respiratory condition. The medical bills were stacking up like autumn leaves, each one representing another sleepless night ahead. I remember sitting beside his bed, listening to the gentle rhythm of his breathing through the nebulizer mask, wondering how I was going to manage the mounting expenses that seemed to multiply faster than I could calculate solutions. The insurance company had denied coverage for the specialized treatment he needed, claiming it was experimental. $5,000 for the first month alone. Then there would be the follow-up visits, the medications, the potential surgery. If the treatment didn't work, my wife had taken a part-time job at the local grocery store, coming home exhausted with aching feet and stories of difficult customers. I watched her count tips at the kitchen table each night, her face etched with worry lines that hadn't been there 6 months earlier. My phone buzzed constantly with text messages I couldn't bear to answer. Colleagues asking about project deadlines I'd missed. My boss wondering why my presentations lacked their usual energy. Friends inviting us to dinner, not knowing we were surviving on rice and beans most nights to save money for medical expenses. Each notification felt like another weight added to an already crushing load. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks, and we were short by $800. The car needed new brakes, making a grinding sound that reminded me daily of another expense we couldn't afford. My father had called earlier, his voice weak, mentioning that his own medical tests had revealed something concerning. More doctor visits, more bills, more sleepless nights, stretching endlessly ahead. I found myself staring at spreadsheets until 2 in the morning, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that never quite fit together. My coffee cup trembling in my hands as I calculated and recalculated scenarios that all led to the same conclusion. We were drowning, and I couldn't see the surface anymore. The weight of being a provider, a protector, a father who was supposed to have answers pressed down on my chest until breathing became conscious effort rather than natural rhythm. Every evening brought the same ritual of worry. Checking bank balances that seemed to shrink overnight, reading medical articles online searching for miracle cures or clinical trials that might offer hope without the devastating cost, watching my son play with his toys, blissfully unaware that his laughter might be interrupted by another hospital stay we couldn't afford. The stress had begun manifesting physically, headaches that lasted for days, stomach problems that made eating difficult, a constant tension in my neck and shoulders that no amount of stretching could relieve. Sleep became elusive, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios the moment my head hit the pillow. What if the treatment didn't work? What if we lost the house? What if I couldn't provide for my family? But tonight, something different is going to happen. Tonight, we're going to discover what occurs when we stop carrying these burdens alone and start believing that miracles begin the moment we acknowledge we can't carry everything ourselves. The silence of night has a way of amplifying our feelings of helplessness. Doesn't it, when the last phone call has been made, when there's no one left to ask for advice, when even the internet searches yield the same disappointing results? I remember one particular night, sitting alone in my car, in an empty parking lot, after losing my job of 12 years. The company had downsized, they said. Budget cuts. Nothing personal. The fluorescent street lamp cast an eerie yellow glow through my windshield, creating long shadows that seemed to mirror the darkness in my heart. I watched other cars pass by on the distant highway, their headlights like shooting stars, carrying people to destinations. They knew people with purpose and paychecks and plans that made sense. I felt suspended between my old life and an unknown future, like standing on the edge of a cliff with no bridge in sight. For 38 years, I had believed in the power of hard work preparation and careful planning. I had spreadsheets for everything: 5-year plans, retirement calculations, emergency funds that I thought would be sufficient for any crisis. I had controlled my diet, my exercise routine, my career trajectory with military precision. Yet here I sat, realizing that all my careful orchestration had crumbled in a single afternoon meeting. My son's health condition had developed despite all my research into genetics and environmental factors. The doctor had shrugged when I asked about prevention, saying simply, "Sometimes these things just happen." My marriage had grown strained despite our communication workshops and date night schedules. My wife and I had begun speaking in logistics rather than love, discussing medication schedules and work shifts instead of dreams and hopes. The job market had shifted while I wasn't looking. Skills I had spent decades developing were suddenly obsolete, replaced by technologies I barely understood. Younger candidates with newer certifications were getting interviews I couldn't even secure. The career counselor had suggested I might need to consider an entirely different field, starting over at an entry-level position with entry-level pay. Even my body was betraying my efforts at control. Despite regular exercise and healthy eating, my blood pressure had begun climbing. The doctor wanted to prescribe medication, adding another monthly expense, and another reminder that I couldn't even manage my own physical systems effectively. Sleep had become my enemy instead of my friend, bringing anxiety dreams and morning headaches instead of restoration. I gripped the steering wheel that night, feeling the leather beneath my palms solid and real in a world that suddenly felt unstable. The digital clock on the dashboard read 2:30 in the morning, and I wondered how many other people were awake at that moment, sitting in their own cars or bedrooms, wrestling with their own versions of powerlessness. The wind picked up gently, rocking the car and creating a soft whistling sound through the slightly open window. It reminded me of my childhood lying in bed during summer storms, feeling small but somehow safe in the vastness of forces beyond my control. That night in the parking lot, I began to remember something I had forgotten in my adult quest for control and security. But this is precisely where miracles begin to unfold. In the sacred space of acknowledged limitation, when we stop pretending we can manage everything alone. Tonight, let me introduce you to Jehovah El Roy, the God who sees us exactly where we are, even in empty parking lots at 2:30 in the morning. There comes a moment when fighting becomes more exhausting than surrender, when the clenched fist finally opens into a receiving palm. I remember the night I discovered this truth, kneeling beside my mother's hospital bed, as machines beeped their electronic lullabies around us. She had been battling cancer for 18 months, and the treatments were taking their toll on both her body and our family's emotional reserves. I had spent countless hours researching alternative treatments, consulting with specialists across the country, maintaining detailed spreadsheets of her medications and symptoms. I had reorganized her diet, installed air purifiers in her home, and created elaborate schedules to ensure she never missed an appointment or dose of medication. I was determined to manage her healing through sheer force of will and careful planning. That particular evening, she looked smaller than usual. In the hospital bed, her once vibrant red hair now sparse and gray from chemotherapy. Her breathing was labored, and the oxygen monitor kept triggering soft alarms that brought nurses rushing in to adjust settings. I had been awake for 36 hours, surviving on vending machine coffee and determination, trying to coordinate with doctors and insurance companies and family members, who all seemed to need different pieces of information. As I knelt there, exhaustion finally breaking through my defenses, I placed my hands on the white hospital blanket and felt the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. For the first time in months, I stopped trying to fix everything and simply acknowledged the truth I had been avoiding. God, I whispered, my voice cracking with fatigue and fear. I cannot heal her. I cannot stop time. I cannot control this disease or the treatment or the outcome. I surrender. The moment those words left my lips, something shifted in the sterile hospital room. Not the dramatic rush of wind or flash of light that movies might portray, but something subtler and more profound. A gentle breeze seemed to flow through my chest, despite the sealed windows and controlled climate of the medical facility. The constant tension in my shoulders began to ease, and for the first time in weeks, I could take a deep breath that reached all the way to the bottom of my lungs. Surrender. I learned that night is not the same as giving up. It's not waving a white flag in defeat or abandoning hope for positive outcomes. Instead, it's like learning to drive a car with power steering after years of manual effort. You don't stop steering, but you stop fighting the wheel at every turn. You learn to work with forces greater than your own strength, to trust systems designed to help rather than hinder your progress. Surrender means releasing my death grip on outcomes while maintaining my faithful participation in the process. It means planting seeds without demanding that I control the weather, the soil conditions, or the timeline for harvest. It means loving my children without trying to script their entire life stories, supporting them through their own journeys rather than directing them according to my limited vision. That night in the hospital, I began surrendering my financial anxieties piece by piece. The mortgage payment, the medical bills, the uncertainty about my career. Each worry felt like a stone I had been carrying in an invisible backpack. As I named them and consciously placed them in God's hands, the load literally became lighter. Not because the circumstances changed immediately, but because I stopped trying to carry burdens that were never meant for human shoulders alone. I surrendered my need to understand the timeline of healing, both for my mother and my son. Instead of demanding explanations for why good people suffer or why prayers sometimes seem unanswered, I began accepting that some questions have answers that exist beyond my current capacity to comprehend. Like a child, learning to trust that the parent knows the way home, even when the route seems unfamiliar. As dawn approached in that hospital room, I experienced something I can only describe as supernatural peace. Not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of someone greater than the difficulty. Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides, was already preparing solutions I couldn't see from my limited perspective. And when we truly let go, space is created for something beautiful to take root in the fertile soil of surrender. Miracles rarely announce themselves with fanfare or dramatic special effects. More often, they arrive like sunrise, so gradual and natural that we might miss them if we're watching for fireworks instead of paying attention to the gentle transformation of darkness into light. I want to share with you what happened in the weeks following that night of surrender, because understanding the nature of true miracles changed everything about how I pray and how I sleep. There are two types of miracles that God works in our lives, and both are equally important for our peace and protection. The external miracles are the ones we often pray for first. The unexpected check in the mail, the job opportunity that appears from nowhere, the medical test results that defy previous diagnoses. These are beautiful gifts, and I don't want to minimize their impact. But the internal miracles, the ones that happen within our hearts and minds, these are the ones that sustain us through any circumstances. 3 weeks after that hospital surrender, I woke up one morning and realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. The same financial pressures existed. My son still needed expensive medical treatment. My mother was still fighting cancer. My job search was still yielding more rejections than interviews. But something in my core had changed. The panic that had been my constant companion for months was simply gone, replaced by something I can only describe as quiet confidence. This wasn't denial or forced optimism. I wasn't pretending that problems didn't exist, or that everything would automatically work out according to my preferences. Instead, I had developed what the Bible calls a sound mind. My thoughts were no longer racing in circles, chasing worst-case scenarios down rabbit holes of anxiety. When challenges arose, I could think clearly, make decisions from wisdom rather than fear, and take appropriate action without being paralyzed by overwhelming emotion. The transformation from worry to gratitude happened so gradually that I almost didn't notice it at first. Instead of waking up each morning with a mental inventory of problems to solve, I began noticing small gifts that had always been there. The way morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains, the sound of my son's laughter echoing from the kitchen as he ate breakfast, the warmth of my wife's hand reaching for mine during our evening walks. This shift in perspective created space for what I call divine solutions to emerge. Not magic answers that bypassed natural processes, but creative approaches that I simply couldn't see when my mind was clouded with panic. I began networking differently, having authentic conversations, instead of desperate pitches. I started asking different questions about my son's treatment, which led to discovering a clinical trial that covered all expenses. I learned to receive help from friends and family without shame, seeing their generosity as part of God's provision rather than personal failure. The external miracles began appearing too, but they came in ways I hadn't expected. A former colleague contacted me about a consulting position that perfectly matched my skills while offering flexibility for family responsibilities. My son's participation in the clinical trial not only provided free treatment, but connected us with other families who became our support system. My mother's cancer responded better to treatment than doctors had initially predicted, and her spirit remained strong throughout the process. But here's what I want you to understand about these external changes. They were wonderful, but they weren't what gave me peace. The peace came from the internal miracle, the supernatural transformation of my thought patterns and emotional responses. Even if none of those external circumstances had improved, I would still have been able to sleep peacefully, because I had learned to rest in something larger than my circumstances. This is the miracle that's available to you tonight. Not necessarily the immediate resolution of all your problems, though that may come too, but definitely the transformation of your inner world from chaos to calm, from fear to faith, from restless striving to confident rest. Jehovah Shalom. The God of peace specializes in creating internal environments where miracles can grow like flowers in well-tended soil. This peace is not just for tonight, but for every night ahead. It's not dependent on perfect circumstances or complete understanding. It's the peace that passes understanding. The peace that can coexist with uncertainty because it's rooted in something more reliable than our ability to control outcomes. Sleep is far more than just physical rest for our bodies. It's a daily practice of trust, a surrender that happens every single night when we close our eyes and release conscious control over our lives for 6 to 8 hours. Think about how remarkable this is. Every night, without really considering the implications, we practice dying to our waking selves and trusting that we'll be restored to consciousness in the morning. I learned this lesson in a profound way through a dream that came during one of the most challenging periods of my life. I had been struggling with a business decision that seemed to have no good options. A potential partner was pressuring me to sign a contract, claiming the opportunity wouldn't wait. Every rational analysis suggested this was our family's best chance for financial stability. But something deep in my spirit felt unsettled about the arrangement. For weeks, I had been losing sleep over this decision. I would lie in bed, running through scenarios, calculating risks, trying to force clarity through mental effort. The deadline was approaching, and I knew I had to choose soon. That's when I had the dream that changed everything. In the dream, I was standing at a crossroads in a beautiful countryside setting. 2 paths stretched before me, both looking well-maintained and promising. The path to the left was wider, paved with smooth stones, and I could see other travelers moving confidently along its course. The path to the right was narrower, made of packed earth, and seemed to curve around a hill, so I couldn't see where it led. As I stood there in the dream, trying to decide which way to go, an elderly man appeared beside me. He didn't speak, but somehow I understood that he was showing me something important. He pointed to the smooth, wide path and then gestured toward my feet. Looking down, I noticed that I was wearing expensive leather shoes that would be perfect for that paved surface. Then he pointed to the narrow path, and I saw that my shoes had somehow changed to sturdy hiking boots perfect for uncertain terrain. I woke from that dream with absolute clarity about the business decision. The smooth path represented the contract that seemed so attractive and logical. The narrow path represented trusting God's guidance, even when I couldn't see the complete journey ahead. Within 3 days of declining that contract, I learned that the company was under federal investigation for fraudulent practices. Had I signed, my family would have been financially and legally devastated. This experience taught me that God often protects us through our sleep-filtering information and providing guidance through dreams and rest that our conscious minds might miss during busy daylight hours. During sleep, our defenses are down. Our analytical minds are quiet, and we're more receptive to spiritual communication that gets drowned out by daytime noise. Physical protection happens during sleep as well, in ways both visible and invisible. Our bodies literally heal faster when we're sleeping peacefully rather than tossing with anxiety. Stress hormones decrease immune systems, strengthen, and cellular repair processes accelerate during deep rest. But beyond biological healing, there's a spiritual dimension to nighttime protection that's equally important. I think of the nights when insomnia kept me awake only to discover later that staying home prevented me from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The evening when my son woke up from a nightmare and asked me to check on him, leading me to discover he was running a fever that needed immediate attention. The restless night that prompted me to call my elderly neighbor in the morning, finding her fallen and unable to reach her phone. God works through our sleep cycles, our dream patterns, our subconscious processing in ways that extend far beyond what we can measure or fully understand. Angels, according to Scripture, are ministering spirits sent to serve those who inherit salvation. This ministry doesn't stop when we close our eyes. If anything, it intensifies during our most vulnerable hours. Psalm 121 reminds us that our keeper never slumbers or sleeps. While we rest, God remains alert, watching over our coming and going, guarding our lives from this time forth and forever. This isn't just poetic language. It's a practical promise that our nights are covered by divine protection that operates independently of our awareness or effort. Tonight, as you prepare to enter this sacred rest, remember that you're not just lying down to unconsciousness. You're entering into partnership with Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals, who works through rest to restore what has been depleted and repair what has been damaged. As we prepare to enter this sacred rest, let's move toward the final surrender that makes peaceful sleep possible. Tonight, I choose peace. Tonight, I place everything into your hands, Lord. These aren't just nice words to say before sleep. They're a declaration of faith that changes everything about how we approach rest and how we wake up in the morning. Let me tell you about the night I learned what these words really mean and how they transformed my relationship with sleep forever. It was after months of battling insomnia, lying awake night after night with my mind spinning through endless loops of worry and planning. I had tried everything the sleep experts recommended. No screens before bedtime, cooler room temperature, chamomile, tea, meditation apps, even prescription. Sleep aids that left me groggy and disconnected the next day. Nothing worked because my mind simply wouldn't stop working. The breakthrough came on a night when I was too exhausted to fight anymore. I had been lying in bed for 3 hours, watching the clock move from 11:30 to 2:30 in the morning, feeling more awake with each passing minute. My wife was sleeping peacefully beside me, and I felt utterly alone, with thoughts that seemed to gain strength in the darkness. Finally, somewhere around 3 o'clock, I stopped trying to fall asleep and started talking to God with complete honesty. "I'm tired of fighting," I whispered into the darkness. "I'm tired of trying to solve everything. Tired of carrying all this responsibility. Tired of lying here, night after night, feeling like I have to figure out the world before I can rest. I'm giving up. Not giving up on life, but giving up on being in charge of everything." What happened next felt like setting down a suitcase I had been carrying for years without realizing how heavy it had become. The relief was immediate and physical. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched, my breathing deepened. Within minutes, I was asleep more deeply than I had slept in months. I woke up 8 hours later, feeling more refreshed than any energy drink or vitamin supplement had ever made me feel. That night taught me the difference between trying to sleep and choosing to rest. Sleep is a biological function that we can't force, but rest is a decision we can make regardless of whether our brains cooperate immediately. Rest means releasing our mental death grip on the problems and possibilities that seem so urgent in the middle of the night. Let me be specific about what this looks like practically. When you lie down tonight, consciously hand over your worry list to God, item by item. The financial pressure you've been carrying for months. Place it in His hands. The health concerns that spike your anxiety every time you think about them. Hand them over. The relationship conflicts that seem to have no good solutions. Release them. The work deadlines that feel impossible to meet. Let God carry the weight of time and outcomes. This doesn't mean becoming irresponsible or passive about real issues that need attention. It means distinguishing between productive planning during appropriate hours and destructive worrying during hours designed for rest. It means trusting that problems won't evaporate just because you stop thinking about them at 3 in the morning, but solutions often become clearer after a night of peaceful sleep. Remember that your identity isn't defined by your ability to solve every problem or control every outcome. You are God's beloved child, worthy of love and care, regardless of how many items remain unchecked on your to-do list. You don't have to earn rest through perfect performance. Rest is a gift, not a reward for completed tasks. As you prepare for sleep tonight, imagine yourself as a small child who has been trying to help Daddy fix the car engine. You've been handing him tools and asking questions and trying to understand every component. But now it's bedtime, and Daddy says, "Thank you for helping. Now it's time for you to rest. I'll keep working on this while you sleep, and in the morning we'll see what tomorrow brings." This is what it means to rest in God's hands. You don't have to understand His methods or timeline. You don't have to stay awake to supervise His work. You can trust that nothing important will be lost while you sleep. In fact, some of the most important work happens during the hours when you're not consciously trying to make it happen. Tomorrow morning you'll wake up to a new day that God has been preparing while you slept. Opportunities you can't see tonight may be taking shape in ways that will surprise you. People you need to meet may be making decisions right now that will intersect with your path tomorrow. Resources you need may be moving toward you through channels you never thought to explore. But all of that is tomorrow's gift. Tonight's gift is the peace that comes from knowing you're completely loved, thoroughly protected, and carefully watched over by someone who never grows tired, never gets overwhelmed, and never loses track of what matters most. Nothing is lost in God's hands, even while you sleep. Has this prayer touched your heart tonight? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share with me what keeps you awake at night and how you're learning to surrender those burdens to God's care. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. If this message has brought you peace, please hit that like button and share it with others who might need this reminder that miracles begin when we stop trying to handle everything alone. Subscribe to join our community of nighttime prayer warriors who are discovering the power of surrendering our days to God's perfect rest. Thank you for spending these precious evening moments with me. May your sleep be deep, your dreams be peaceful, and your morning be filled with renewed hope. Rest well, my friend. Tomorrow is a new beginning, but tonight is for peace.